Well, in this session, we will understand the ethical practices that are to be considered whenever we're dealing with the data. Data science involves in collection of the data, huge data, tons of data, GBs of data. Okay, we're going to collect a lot of personal information here, maybe from the websites, maybe from the online repositories, or collecting the data from the individuals personally. Whenever we're dealing with the data, this data has to be utilized in a fair way. It should not be misused. So what are all the policies or the practices that are to be considered by a person who actually collect the data or analyze the data? The first one is the fairness. Ethical data science ensures that the models and analysis do not result in an unfair treatment. Maybe your model or by yourself. You should make sure that the data, rather the way it is used, should not result in an unfair treatment. Already there are a lot of unfair treatments in the society. There are discriminations, differentiations. Here, your model or the data, the way you are using the data, should not lead to another problem. You need to make sure that the data is being utilized in a perfect way in a society. Okay, the analysis do not result in unfair treatment or harm to individuals or groups. This involves avoiding the reinforcement of the societal inequalities through a biased data or algorithms. You developed a model. Your model is going to identify the monkeys. You collect a lot of data from the forest in which you should be able to identify the monkeys. Now the thing is, whenever a new picture has been fed to the model, it should be able to classify this correctly to a monkey category. Here, whenever you feed a human being's picture, it should not be classified as into a monkey. Then there will be a lot of discriminations, right? Again, something unavoidable is on the cards. So you just need to make sure that your model or the way you treat the data should not lead to some other consequences which are actually not required. We actually are facing several problems. Let us live with these problems. Your models or the way you use the data should not lead us to some different problems. Okay, transparency, ethical practices call for transparency in data collection, processing and algorithm decision making. Users should be informed about how their data is used and the model should be explainable. Let us say you just start collecting the model. You're collecting the data directly from the individuals. When you are collecting the data from the individual, do not put them in dark. Just explain them why you are collecting the data. Take their consent and explain them how this data is going to be utilized, what exactly your model is. And if they are alright with this, they will be able to provide the data. You should not hide anything with respect to your model or the way you are using the data. Everything should be very transparent indeed. Right then, users will come up, if they like, to provide their data. Next, responsibility. Data scientists must consider the potential societal consequences of their work, ensuring that their models are used for the good, do not exacerbate existing problems such as discrimination or misinformation. This goes hand in hand with the fairness itself. Whenever you develop a model, that model should comply to all the society framework. It should also comply to the regulations of our government, right? It should not lead to some other problems. Your model should be ethical. Your model should be legal, legitimate, and your model should be implementable. Okay, you cannot use a model for some illegal purposes. Okay, this is what it's all about. Responsibility. You just knowingly or unknowingly you may create a model which can be utilized by some illegal forces of the society. You need to make sure that every consequence of your model deployment is completely understood by yourself as well as the team members of your project. Yeah. Next one is just a minute. Yeah. data protection. You should be able to protect the data. For an instance, you just are getting a phone number of the people. When the phone number is collected, now you can understand how many times you actually are being called by some fraud or scamsters. The thing is, you always wonder, rather I always wonder, how my phone number is so popular for among these scamsters or the banking people. Always, right from morning to evening, if I receive 100 calls, at least 90 of the calls are from those scamsters or the banks. I will provide you this credit card and you just need to give you half of this. There are a lot of calls that I used to get. This is simply because the data which is being collected earlier by some professional has actually been shared unethically with all these groups. This is the worst thing. So, whenever you're collecting the data, you make sure that it is used fairly and only with those people who actually required this data, not to the people actually who are actually not a part of your project or a stakeholder. Okay, so with the collection of vast amounts of the personal data is essential to ensure that the individual's privacy is protected. It involves in complying with the regulation like GDPR, government regulations, ensuring secure data storage and anonymizing the data sets where possible. When you collect the data, here the personal details should be abstracted, should completely be hidden. You should anonymize. That is, you should completely extract the details of the personals, and you should only be able to store the essential data. Name, gender, where they live actually is unnecessary for your data model. Okay, so wherever it is possible, you should be able to anonymize. Whenever you anonymize, the important unnecessary details can be extracted and can be left over. Only the details which are required to contribute to your model can be kept. Remaining details can be left over. But the problem is when you integrate this as the way it is received, this can be utilized by some non-ethical people, right? Although you did not share the data personally, the data may be misused. Okay, without your attention, the data may be misused. So you should be able to anonymize the data sets. I hope you got the word anonymize. Anonymize meaning whenever I am collecting the data, I am getting the name, their phone number and their gender, their likes towards the mobile phone, what the features that they require. So it's just I'm collecting here. Now here right after the collection, at some point I can ignore the name and the age and the gender. Right? I can extract this and leave it. If I keep the data the way it is received, the way it is collected, then this can be used for some different purposes by some other people, although you did not share it personally to them, right? So this is what anonymizing. Anonymizing meaning we just get the details, only those are required, by leaving name or any detail which personally leads to a personal. Okay, so we should anonymize data sets where possible. Consent. Consent meaning we should take the consent. Completely with their will and wits, they should be able to provide the data. Right after you explain the consequences, right after the data has actually been utilized, why the data is being collected, how you are using the data. Right then, after developing and deploying the model, how the data can be utilized. Okay, has to be explained. Right after you explain, you just need to take the consent. So, consent is one of the important. Collecting and using the personal data without proper consent violates the privacy. Data scientists should ensure that the individuals are informed about how their data will be used and that consent has been obtained. The next thing is data anonymization and re-identification. Here one more thing is although you anonymize the data, it is quite possible to reintegrate the data. Although you left over some unnecessary details, based on some tools and at a later stage of your project, the data may be integrated again. You need to make sure that would never happen. Okay, so for even anonymized data can be sometimes be re-identified through the technique like data triangulation. There is something called data triangulation. At some point, the data may be integrated together again. Okay, so where multiple data points are combined to reveal the personal information, care must be taken to ensure true anonymization or limit the use of the sensitive data. Okay, so these are the ethical practices. Of course, these are limited. that has actually been I've been showcasing here, but not practically limited only these two. Okay, since you are collecting a lot of data and dealing with a lot of data, you have to be very careful how this data is being utilized by not putting the individual interest who provide the data at the stake. Thank you.